Welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged, a platform where we engage with thought leaders shaping the future of healthcare, medical affairs, and clinical research. I'm your host, Dr. Amit Dang, and through this series, we aim to explore the evolving landscape of pharmaceuticals, digital health, and evidence based decision making. Today, we are excited to welcome Dr. Saleel Raut, Head of Medical Affairs at Amneal Pharmaceuticals, with a career that spans leading roles at Novartis, Pfizer, BMS, and early research positions in the US. He blends deep clinical research experience with real world medical strategy. Passionate about evidence based practice, patient engagement, and medical innovation, today he is going to throw light on the art and science of medical capability development. So, good morning, Dr. Salil, and welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amit, and thank you for this opportunity to engage with you and a wider audience and discuss a topic that's very close to my heart.
So, Dr. Salil, why is structured capability development becoming increasingly critical for medical affairs teams today compared to 10 years ago?
Dr. Amit, the capability gap, as I think we'll also talk about in further questions, is kind of widening. Years ago, our focus was more on scientific dissemination. Medical affairs was in a very nascent stage, and medical affairs professionals were looked at pure science disseminators in terms of what's the new science around new molecules that's coming out. Physicians utilize that science to make evidence-based decisions. Very, very nascent, looked upon as a very support function that if there's a medical query, let's do this or do that. From there, we have evolved into more nuanced roles where medical affairs professionals are now wearing multiple hats and they perform multiple roles. There's no formal training right
Right.
now for these new roles or new capabilities that they have to present to the leadership within the organization, to the stakeholders outside. So that gap needs to be bridged. And that's why I think we need to make it more structured in terms of capability development as to what are the needs of the organization and how can medical affairs perform or fulfill those needs while being very strategic and not just a support. I think all these newer capabilities that are needed will help medical affairs professionals flourish further.
Right. I guess so. The reason there's so much of discussion around how the medical affairs has been evolving from support to the strategic function now. So, Dr. Salil, in your view, what are the core capabilities that modern medical affairs teams must develop beyond traditional scientific expertise?
So I think there are multiple. There are many capabilities that need to evolve in modern medical affairs teams. If I have to list in terms of priorities, I would say stakeholder management would be the biggest. After that, emotional intelligence
Got it.
in terms of how you work with these stakeholders. And then the most common one or the most easy one is the business acumen bit, because you need to understand the business in order to contribute to it meaningfully via strategic thinking. Then handling stakeholders becomes very critical. And I say this to my mentees, my reportees. Your science is a given, but
Yeah.
how you manage the people you work with, that will determine your progress. And when I say manage, don't get me wrong, because I remember my very first session very early on in my career on stakeholder management. And there I actually asked this question to the trainer. I feel like this is manipulation. You're talking about stakeholder management, look at the personalities and you have to adjust yourself to that. But then as I grew in my career, I realized it's much more complicated than that, and it is not something that they teach you in academia. So that's where I love the title that you've given to this session, the art and science, because your scientific capabilities are given, but the art of managing stakeholders, that will be tested. And I think that's one of them. Emotional intelligence, absolutely. We can be the biggest scientific professionals, but if you don't understand the people around you, it's of no use. Because across my career, I have seen three types of individuals primarily: very scientific, but very low on people skills,
Got it.
highly on people skills, but okay on science skills, and then a middle ground where you do good on science and you're good with people. So take a guess who does well in their careers and who progresses further.
Perhaps the third one, like the middle ground one who's balancing the
Yes,
act. Okay.
yes, yes. I think even then the balancers, if you have the basic scientific skills, but if you're able to work with people really well, because at the end of the day, I believe that it's not about what you contribute from a technical perspective, but how you make the people feel. They will remember how you made them feel. Even after you leave the organization, they will not talk about the amazing ad boards you did or the international speaker programs that you did. But they will remember that, yes, I enjoyed working with this individual because he made me feel psychologically safe, or he listened to me, he valued my inputs, and we had a good collaboration, things like that.
So when you think about capability building, what's the right balance between technical skills, say for example, evidence generation, HTA engagement, and the softer leadership skills, say cross-functional influence or strategic thinking?
It's, I think, difficult to put a number, I would say. But if I have to, I would still go with the 40-60. 40 on your technical skills, where you can talk about evidence generation, HTA engagement, because you know the core based on your academic training. And then you have to build on that core. But in terms of your cross-functional influence, strategic thinking, you're learning on the job.
Got it.
You are starting from scratch. Again, this may be my others' experience may be different, but early on in my career, it was like a deer in the headlights. Because being in the medical field or in the scientific field, we are used to working on our experiments, working with patients, doing our bit, going home, and that's about it. Here, actually, we are at the center of the pharma world where we work with marketing, sales, market access, regulatory, clinical affairs. So
Right.
even your stakeholder mindsets, your stakeholder thinking is so very different that you need to engage with each of them in a very different way, support each of them in a very different way, understand their priorities in a very different way. So all of that takes practice, takes effort, and some hand holding from your managers or maybe even someone senior within the organization to be able to navigate this route. Because I mean, it can go either ways, right?
Right.
You can be the star because you're working with people, you're extroverted, your people skills are great, or you can be in the depths where you're not getting along with anyone. And then we've all seen the long email chains and the back and forth and who said who and who did
Right.
what, and
Yeah.
all of that can be mitigated. So I highly value people skills as a medical affairs professional. Science is needed, of course.
Given.
I tell my mentees, you got the foot in your door is because of your science. Your entry in this field is because of your science. Nobody's challenging that anymore. But what you do with it and how you do your job gets very critical for your progress as well as the development of the organization.
So, could you share a few effective approaches or frameworks you have seen for upskilling medical affairs professionals, especially in the global and the emerging markets?
So we have a dearth of frameworks, or rather, I would say, capability building initiatives. I've seen organizations develop their own. I have been a part of a couple of them myself, where there is a certification that's given by King's College London, where you have a 1 year program and it exposes you to all the different aspects of medical affairs and the cross-functional teams. There are capability building teams within the organization that can help you develop these capabilities by doing workshops or sessions. But I think somewhere at the end of the line, there needs to be a monitoring of these capability building initiatives. Because deep down, somewhere I feel that we don't do justice to these initiatives. Sometimes it can become a tick mark activity, right? My organization needs to build this capability. I'll do this workshop as a part of the capability building team, and I'm done with my KPI. But what is the output? How are you seeing this being put in practice? Are you getting feedback from your medical affairs teams in terms of how it helped them, how it did not help them, how can we do better? So I believe there needs to be more focus on these initiatives and there needs to be more prioritization if we want to build stronger teams. That's where, coming to my earlier point, we talked about being a strategic function, right? Is the organization thinking of medical affairs as a strategic function or more of a support function? And it's a chicken or egg story.
Yeah,
Because if you want to be more strategic, you will invest more in resources, develop your teams. But if you're more support function, then you don't want to have more resources and don't want to invest. But then you can't become a strategic function without investing resources. But resources cannot be given for support functions. We need them to be more strategic. I think it's a never-ending story. But I would say priorities from the organization are needed in terms of medical affairs development. Definitely.
true. Even this year, like we do plan to launch a certification program in medical affairs. So I'm just hoping that it goes well because it seems like there is a demand in the market. So we have kind of, categorized the whole into 30 different chapters, 5 modules, and trying to touch upon as many aspects as possible when it comes to medical affairs.
Dr. Amit, that's a great initiative, right? It's a need of the hour, but I would also take it a step further maybe and tie up with organizations. Your different major pharma organizations existing in India to begin with, and talk to them about this pipeline of talent that you're building. So tomorrow, when they are recruiting medical advisors or MSLs or RMAs, they already have a talent pool with them who are exposed to medical affairs, and now they want to put it in practice. Teaching someone from scratch is time consuming, but if
Right.
you have a ready talent, I think that will be a welcome for any pharma organization.
Practicalities of medical affairs is never taught in the college. I mean, it's purely academic there.
Correct,
So I
correct,
totally understand that if there is a
correct,
kind of
correct.
a strategic thing between a course like this and the companies, then it seems like a win-win situation for everyone.
Absolutely. And I will even take this a step back. And these were thoughts I also had when I was thinking about our discussion that even academia should be tapped. What I know from some of my previous colleagues that in MBBS now they have a small course on medical affairs. But what about we do something like this in the MD pharma curriculum, MD pharmacology, or even your dental curriculums, or even your PharmD curriculums, where the students get a choice, maybe a 6 month, one semester, they have a course on medical affairs, a 3 month internship with an organization. So you learn the theory and then you work with organizations to put it in practice. The possibilities are limitless, but again, somebody needs to take that initial step.
This could be a good starting point, and I'll definitely keep this in mind because we do have a similar plan. So let's see how it works out. In oncology or complex therapy areas, how do you tailor medical capability development programs differently from more established areas like cardiology or diabetes?
So your basics will still remain the same. As I was discussing with you for early on, your stakeholder management skills or your emotional intelligence, developing your business acumen, I think these core skills will stay the same. You may have to tweak them a little bit when it comes to established areas versus more complex areas. Because in complex areas, especially say oncology, you will have a lot of focus in terms of evidence generation, real world data generation, HTA assessments, HUR studies. So, of course, you need a proper strategy to understand the core unmet need and make sure that your tactics align with those strategic priorities. But in established areas where not much is happening, even organizations deprioritize some of them. A medical affairs professional there needs to work harder to understand what are the unmet needs. Once you have identified the needs, what are the strategic priorities on which you need to work on? Resources become a challenge. So, how to position your therapy area or your product better within the organization, get resources for some of the key priority areas and key projects that you want to drive. It's about resilience, it's about your
Right.
mindset shift. I don't believe a medical affairs professional is pigeonholed to a certain therapy area. I have worked across 4 or 5 therapy areas during my career. It could be a very scientific areas versus say calcium or vitamin D, right?
Right.
But all of them will need very different mindsets and very different kind of focus and understand within ourselves how much you need to push versus not to push because the priorities need to be aligned with what therapy area you're working on.
While we are discussing about this capability building, so how important is it for the medical affairs teams to build digital data analytics and real world evidence capabilities for future success?
I would say very, very, very important because this is the future, right? We've come a long way from being a support function with just scientific dissemination to being now the pillars of data generation. Building on data, digital is going to play a key role. I would even add AI to this list because that is going to be the future growth driver. AI is playing a huge role in drug development. Now, AI in medical affairs is coming up very strongly. We are able to now answer complicated questions using AI, using
Right.
multiple data sources. So,
Right.
here it is more about effective resource utilization because now our team can spend more time engaging with doctors more meaningfully for more evidence-based practices. Whereas initially it was more about data mining. Oh, if this question has come in or a query has come in from a doctor, now I need to go look into PubMed, look up 20 articles, synthesize some of them, find out the relevant ones. But with AI, it's brilliant because now AI is able to even give you the resources. So obviously, as a human, you have to go check whether it makes sense, not just blindly copy. So that's where we come in with our nuanced eye and making sure that relevant information goes to the doctors. And these will get more and more critical as we go further.
So, Dr. Salil, what role do mentorship and cross-functional exposure, be it commercial, access, regulatory, play in accelerating medical team growth and capability enhancement?
I again very much needed, and as we have been talking, the skill sets need to expand. We don't need to get MBAs in order to understand the business, but on the job training with functions that we closely work with is very much needed to not only understand where they are coming from, but also helps us develop a perspective as to why things happen a certain way. When you sit in business meetings, you need to understand why a certain thing is a priority versus another. Because for you, it's great science. Why are we not doing this real world study? Because it's going to give us great data. But is that data solving a huge unmet need? Effectively utilizing the resources that the company has, keeping in mind the budgets and the top line and the bottom line. So these basic concepts will only be understood if you're training on the job because they'll be quick and fast, right? I know many organizations offer secondments, stretch assignments. They do these kind of upskilling trainings based on the interest of the individuals. Many medical affairs professionals are moving into commercial as well. So a few years into medical affairs, they enjoy the business side of things. They end up getting an MBA. I think that's an
Yeah.
exposure that any professional should get because I don't think we need to stick to just one if your interest lies beyond. And I have seen medical affairs teams become much better marketeers because they understand the science. And then when they get the business training, the brand or the function really evolves and matures very quickly under them.
From your experience, what common gaps do you observe in medical affairs teams today, and how should companies proactively address them?
I think gaps could be very company specific, organization specific. We've come a long way from where we were, going from only being, science, non-promotional. I'm not saying medical affairs needs to get promotional, but we need to understand that side of things as well. So bridging those gaps becomes important more from an understanding perspective. What today do we not understand from a business side? How can we be one organization, right? Any organization that you work with is this doesn't have to be marketing versus sales versus medical versus access. Because when you meet a doctor, for example, a top care well, he or she is not going to differentiate for the most part, whether you are medical marketing, they will share their grievances with you as well if they have a challenge. And then it's not or it's not very prudent to say, oh, I'm medical, so let me get my sales team. Yes, you divert it to your marketing or sales team later on, but you have to address the query when you are in the doctor's chamber from your organization perspective, even with your medical hat on. So these are some of the capabilities I would say that organizations should work on. Indian medical affairs, I feel, is still evolving. Very different ways of working between global and Indian medical affairs functions. Because established markets, which are very strong if in Europe, etc. I think the way they function there is very different. And the way they think of capability building there is very different. So we need a more localized approach to capability building in India for Indian medical affairs professionals.
Dr. Salil, that brings us to the last question for today. So, looking ahead, how should medical affairs organizations future proof their talent pipeline and capability models to stay competitive and deliver great strategic value?
I think close collaboration with academia because that's where your talent pipeline is. Making sure that the professors understand what medical affairs is and then having either a project or a course within one semester. It doesn't need to be extensive, but at least an exposure. Maybe someone's interested. I found about medical affairs because I took some quiz and it showed that my capabilities were more aligned towards an MSL role. And I
Okay.
had no idea what an MSL role was. And so I Googled it. And that's when I found out this whole exciting field of medical affairs. So first, I would say tie ups with academia, where you have a strong pipeline, where you have individuals interested in doing something that we are doing. Now, with more MD pharmas or dentists or PharmDs coming into this profession, they are now disseminating this to their juniors. But again, it becomes a hearsay. There is no structured understanding of medical affairs. Oh, I do this, I do that. Oh, it seems interesting. I want to get in. And then they find out this whole new world of managing stakeholders from varied thought processes and they get scared, right? developing capabilities from the beginning. So if you're interested in med affairs, you have the scientific capabilities. Let's see how we develop your soft skills or other capabilities needed in this field. You know, on-campus interviews. Tech companies do a great job. They go to their IITs and IIMs and they pick up talent right from there. You know,
Right.
if we have such initiatives with academia, you could pick them up right while they're graduating, bring the freshers in, give them the exposure to medical affairs, and start right from the beginning.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Salil, for shedding light on how medical affairs must evolve beyond scientific depth into strategic, tech savvy, and cross functionality fluent teams. Your emphasis on structured capability frameworks, mentorship, and tailored development across therapy areas offer practical guidance for leaders building high performing medical teams in both global and emerging markets. And we sincerely appreciate your time and wisdom on Pharma Insights Unplugged. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.